Hey everybody, it's Matt Williams and Kelly O'Keefe from Brand Federation. And Kelly, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
It is.
You know what time of the year it is?
It must be Christmas time.
It's not Christmas. It's Naughty and Nice Beer and Brands time of the year.
Even better.
We are here at Vossen Brewery. You can hear the festivities going on behind us, right?
Everyone's having a good time.
Everybody's here celebrating the season, and we are celebrating the season in true Brand Federation style by talking about brands. It's the nerdiest.
What could be better?
Nerdiest Christmas ever.
Doesn't everyone spend their Christmas doing this?
So, as always happens this time of year, Kelly and I have put our heads together with others on the Brand Federation team, and we've come up with our list of naughty and nice brands. Naughty brands, ones who have done some things that we're not quite sure about in the last year. We want to talk about those. And then on the nice list, the brands who we think have done some really great work and reaped the rewards of doing that work over the last year.
And there's some good ones this year.
There are some good ones. We have a third list. The third list is the list that Santa is washing, right? So, as we know, Santa makes his list, checks it twice. He has to watch some brands, and there are some brands that Santa's got his eye on that we want to talk about and see what happens in the coming year, whether they get coal in their stockings or whether they reap the rewards.
It really depends on how they play this. Yeah.
Right. So we want to start with the naughty list because everybody likes the naughty list best.
The naughty list is cool.
Right? So at the top of the naughty list, not a big surprise probably. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3.
Boeing. Boeing. Yeah, Boeing is, you know, I hate seeing Boeing on the naughty list because I was one of those guys who grew up admiring this brand. They introduced the 747, I think back in the 60s, which was the largest commercial aircraft in history at the time. And for a very long time, they introduced innovation after innovation. Their quality was second to none. They actually put the space shuttle for early tests on the back of a Boeing 747, a sturdy enough aircraft that it could carry another aircraft. So they were a great brand. And then things changed. They lost sight of their core culture. They acquired or merged with McDonnell Douglas.
Yep.
And they started to turn their attention not to things like quality and innovation. They turned their attention to things like profitability, efficiency, productivity, which are all sort of words for reducing the amount you spend on things and compromising quality. And the results have been staggering. Not only have they had plane crashes that they shouldn't have had because of their irresponsibility, they've had pilots who once trusted the brand more than even consumers did, turning their backs on the brand and saying, I don't want to fly these planes. But they've had a string of changes in their management team. The CEO resigned, and of course their stock has tanked.
Yep.
They've been investigated by the federal government, and not just our government, but by other governments. You really couldn't be more on the naughty list than Boeing is.
They are in big bold letters at the top of the list.
It's pretty bad.
So there's an amazing stat here that says Boeing has failed over 37% of the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration's safety audits. 37%.
That's incredible.
Like, that doesn't make me want to board that plane.
No, right? If somebody tells you, well, 2 out of 3 chances of you getting on the plane are probably going to be okay.
You got a 66% chance of being okay.
Yeah.
63% actually.
Not comforting. Not comforting.
So there's going to be a theme that goes through the naughty list this year, and the theme is basically brands behaving badly. And not just badly, but behaving in a way that creates like irreconcilable dissonance between what that brand is known for and the way they act.
Yes.
And Boeing is at the top of the list because of the equity that you talked about, which is that they were the leading icon of American engineering. That's what they built that house on engineering.
No question.
And technical expertise and all the things you talked about. And when they have mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake in engineering, the brand blows up.
Yeah.
And that's what we're watching on the Boeing side.
It's horrible. And as you said, when you betray your own values, and these are all, every brand on the naughty list this year has been a top-notch brand, a star brand.
Yep.
But they betray their own values, and when you do that, even before the consumer loses faith in you, your own people do. And so at Boeing, the employees are raising hell about the lowered standards, and they have been doing so for a while and not listened to. Now they're finally being listened to.
Yep, so Boeing's at the top of the list. Looking to the next brand on the list. This brand, 20 years ago, was a tech icon. It was the brand that everybody looked for the little sticker on their laptop to make sure that these chips were inside, that's the hint, were inside that laptop. And since then, the company's stock has declined 61%. At a period where its two biggest competitors' stock have increased 800% and 700% respectively.
That's bad.
And it's Intel. Intel is not on, they're not on a good list. They're on the naughty list.
Again, a stellar brand, arguably the first brand in the world of chips and that kind of technology that was really a brand, that was known by consumers. Enough of a brand that computer manufacturers put their label on because it actually sold more computers to be an Intel-powered computer.
Yep, you could charge more because it had Intel inside and it had that little sticker. And you never really knew, you just saw the sticker and you trusted it, right?
So how did they get left standing on the curb when other guys are killing it?
2 letters, AI. They were incredibly slow to AI, and they got their lunch eaten by NVIDIA and AMD, who jumped on the AI bandwagon. NVIDIA has been the darling of the stock market for the last 24 months.
Unbelievable.
They've gone crazy because they got ahead of AI, and Intel was horribly left behind, terribly left behind on AI.
Yeah, once again, Matt, it makes me think that this is a company who had a history and a culture built on innovation, built on being first to market with innovations, and they've lost it. They let it go.
Right. This is a stagnation story, unfortunately. Yeah. This is another story where the behavior contradicted the equity, and it caused all kinds of problems for the brand, right? Their equity was in innovation, their behavior was the opposite of innovative, and it's caused all kinds of problems for the brand, and it landed it on the naughty list.
Yeah, not good.
Yep.
So who's next on
Next is a retail brand. Here's a quick quiz. How many locations in America are there for Walmart? How many locations does Walmart have?
So I have done a little work with Walmart, and I think it's around 5,000.
It is. It's 4,600. How many locations do Dollar General and Dollar Tree have?
So I'm guessing it's more. I'm going to say 10,000.
36,000 locations.
Extraordinary.
Dollar Tree and Dollar General have 36,000 locations. So if you're unfamiliar with Dollar Tree and Dollar General, they are they're the retailer who opened in very rural, often underserved locations, really super low prices. Unfortunately, they've been plagued over the last year by terrible in-store experience, by lawsuits where people are saying they've got rats running around in their warehouses where they store food. Disgusting, right? And they have done almost nothing to create a digital shopping experience. And it's really, really hurt them.
And what is it doing for things like sales?
So their stock has fallen over 40%. At a time when retailers like Walmart and Amazon are just climbing, right? So the business is really, really hurting. They've also been hit with over $33 million in penalties from OSHA and the government for the way they run their warehouses, for the unsafe conditions they have in their warehouses. So to me, Dollar Tree and Dollar General are great examples of, even when you serve less served consumers, those people deserve and demand a really great shopping experience, and ones that people like Walmart have invested billions of dollars to create. They've done a really nice job in the past decade or so of sprucing up their stores and speeding up their lines, doing all the things that people used to complain about with Walmart. And here's Dollar Tree and Dollar General not doing those things and paying the price for it.
And creating bad workforce conditions.
Bad work conditions, so their internal audience is cranky and pissed off and terrible ambassadors for the brand when you're in the store. The stores are dirty and gross. It's just a bad experience.
Is there CEO Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life? I mean, how do you do such a bad job of creating OSHA violations for your employees and giving your customers food that's been infested by rats?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make that up.
No, it's a bad idea. They also haven't invested in the digital side of retailing, which Walmart has spent so much money trying to keep up with their friends at Amazon. And even the customers that are going to Dollar Tree and Dollar General deserve a great experience and have changed the way they shop. And this is a brand that is not keeping up with those changes, and they're paying the price for it.
Yeah, it's an important reminder that even in rural areas, in underserved areas where these stores are prevalent, consumers have options, they have choices, they will spend money on a great experience, and they want you to uphold values that they share, which is a hard day's work for a hard day's pay,
Yeah. Yes, seems to be a pretty easy brand equation. They haven't quite figured it out. Hopefully they will at Dollar Tree and Dollar General. One more on the list, and this one's a little surprising to me.
Yeah,
but here it is on the list, and it's the Magic Company, Disney.
It is the Magic Company, but maybe a little less magical lately, which is why it found its way on the list. I think Disney has been, throughout its existence, one of the most stellar brands in all of commerce.
Yeah.
They committed a long time ago, under the direction of Walt Disney and his brother Roy, they committed to creating magical experiences for children and families, and they've continued to do so throughout their history. But along the way, and especially in recent years, you've seen a little bit of tarnish on that brand. And I think most recently that tarnish has been, the movies have been lower in quality. They own movie production organizations like Marvel. So all of those great Avengers movies.
Yeah, these
Captain
franchise
America,
kind of properties that they own.
Stellar franchises.
Pixar.
That again and again and again have been at the top of box office. Pixar, same thing. And yet in the last couple of years, those movies have been a little bit lackluster.
Yep.
They've been reviewed more poorly. Their box office has often been squeamish. Getting better.
Yep.
I think we've seen some improvement on that this year. And they've also had trouble at their core business, which is their parks.
That's what's interesting to me. So the box office is, famously fickle. You never really know. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you miss it. They've had some hits in the latter part of the year with Moana 2 and Inside Out 2.
Yeah,
right? So they seem to be kind of getting it back on track on the movie side. What's interesting when you look at Disney's business to me is that the piggy bank of that business is the parks. And the parks are off. And when the parks are off, something interesting is going on. And I think it's got something to do with the economic environment we're living in, the fact that people are stressed by and stretched by inflation. And we all know that the minute you set foot in a Disney park, the money just gets hoovered out of your wallet.
Oh, no question.
Right? So that's got to put strain on park attendance, and the numbers are showing that.
Well, especially when you think to where that money is coming from, because, Disney appeals to all walks of life. And when somebody has saved up enough money to go to Disney, it's often the big highlight of their year. They're doing something for their family that they expect to be extraordinary, and in history, it always has been extraordinary.
Yeah.
But if it's a little less so, if those dollars seem a little bit more egregious, or worse still, I think they have created a culture right now that treats different visitors in different ways.
Yeah.
Some of their guests pay extra to go to the front of the line and to have a more curated experience than others do.
Yeah.
Now, in life we know if you got more money, maybe you have better experiences, but the kids don't know that.
Yeah, right.
And to tell one child, because maybe their parents don't have as much money, that they've got to stand at the end of the line, and another child is being skirted up to the front of the line because they've paid a little more, it doesn't feel true to the values that this brand was established on. And I think they're sorting through that. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think they will. I'm confident about Disney. I don't think they'll be on the naughty list next year. Less confident about places like Boeing and Intel and Dollar Tree and Dollar General. But
they got more work to do.
If I think about Disney, and you think about the raft of intellectual property that brand has. So many amazing brands and so many amazing pieces of entertainment and iconic intellectual property, right? And I know that you and I had the opportunity to see Bob Iger speak last year.
Absolutely, he's great.
He is a very smart dude. Right? So I'm confident Disney will be off this list next year, but it's been interesting to watch him struggle this year.
I think bringing Bob Iger back was a good move. I think his presence is starting to be felt.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it'll be back on the list. Full disclosure, I've worked with Disney on branding challenges in the past. I loved that work. I loved working with them. They were always true to who they were.
Yep.
And I think they'll be back.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, so we've got a naughty list. Boeing at the top, Intel, Dollar Tree and Dollar General, and Disney. And I think, like I said earlier, the theme that runs through this naughty list is brands behaving in a way that creates dissonance in people's minds between what I thought that brand was about and what they seem to be about now based on their behavior. And when that dissonance happens, nothing good comes from it. And the brand ends up on the naughty list. All right, nice list. First brand on the nice list is one that if you close your eyes and you think back to when you were 5 or 6 years old and you're sitting on the floor playing with your blocks, watching TV, what were you watching?
Oh,
You were watching Sesame Street.
Sesame Street.
That's the first brand on the nice list. Why?
Sesame Street deserves to be on the nice list for the same reasons that the naughty companies are on the naughty list. Because they're on the naughty list because they forgot who they were, they lost their soul, they lost their heart, they became a bad version of the Grinch on Christmas Day. But Sesame Street, by God, Sesame Street is Ebenezer Scrooge after he was visited by ghosts.
At the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have consistently stayed true to who they are. And this is I have to, full disclosure, say that I've worked with this brand in the past, and I was taken by that brand. Now, Sesame Street was created not by media companies, not by digital companies, not by entertainment companies or people. It was created by teachers.
Yeah.
And the teachers had this remarkable insight that television, which at the time was perceived as something that sucked the education out of kids, could be reversed to put education into kids. And the concept was sublime for two reasons. One, because of its cost, because the airwaves are free, and they could, at a very, very low cost, put programming into households where the kids wanted to watch, and in many cases watch alongside of their parents. And so they were able to reach millions of kids with education very affordably. But it was also a sublime idea because it stuck. If you watched Sesame Street when you were growing up, did you watch Sesame Street?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, you did. Well, those who watched Sesame Street had higher grades in school than those who didn't. They attained higher degrees of education, often going on to college, versus those who didn't watch Sesame Street. And they actually are living on higher salaries right now because Sesame Street improved their education. Not only did they start that way, but they're still doing it. They were able to say that we're not just a company that distributes our content through television. We're a company that leverages new media to reach more people.
Yeah.
And so they've consistently adopted new media as it comes along, jumping into the internet very early on, and now using social media to reach kids to provide both intellectual education and behavioral and emotional education right at the time they need it.
Right. So how on brand was Elmo's check-in tweet, right? His famous check-in tweet, which was an amazing example of exactly what you're talking about, Kelly, which is a brand that's dedicated to education and using new media to expose kids to that education in new ways. And Elmo's check-in tweet reached over 240 million people. I mean, it's
extraordinary.
It's massive, right? It was
That's
massive.
like the population of the U.S.
Unfortunately, lots of people said, yeah, Elmo, I'm not doing great. But how on brand is it for Sesame Street to have Elmo ask you how you're doing? That's what they do.
So who's next?
So who's next? Gap. This brand that goes back decades and decades. We can all remember buying our jeans at the Gap or buying our khakis
so
at the
cool.
Gap.
That was,
and there was the
coolest place to buy.
Totally, right? Fall into the Gap.
But then they had some trouble, didn't they?
There was a time when they had a really dark period where Gap was kind of boring, kind of lost. It felt like it was floating around. Fast forward to this year, actually the end of last year, new CEO comes in as a guy named Richard Dixon, and his commitment was to get Gap back to the cultural status that it had in the past. And he's done an amazing job of defining the brands in the portfolio. So you not only have Gap, you have Athleta, you have Banana Republic, you have
Old Navy.
Old Navy, exactly. And he's done such a nice job of redefining the cultural space that each of these brands live in. He brought in a guy named Zach Posen, who's a famous designer, to be the creative director
Really
across
smart.
all these brands. And next thing you know, Gap has gone from kind of boring, kind of blah, your dad's khaki store, to these 4 brands occupying really distinct and interesting areas in the culture and in the fashion portfolio, and the brand is doing great. The stock is up 300%.
Oh my God.
Right, since Dixon took over. The business is bumping.
You're saying they're back.
They're back. The business is doing great. And it's all on the back of this idea of design-led innovation. So if you think about the theme of understanding the core of what your brand stands for, the real competency of this brand, the real competency of the Gap brand was proximity to culture and the ability to reflect that culture and the knowledge of that culture in accessible fashion.
Yeah.
They lost their way. Dixon comes back and says, no, we're going to find it back. And we're going to interpret that equity in a way that's surprising and fresh and interesting and strategically smart across the portfolio. And when they got back to that equity and made it modern, business took off. All right, here's another one. This brand has 62 straight quarters of same-store sales growth. That's 15 and a half years of same-store sales growth, right? And the brand is Raising Cane's.
Raising Cane's.
We like chicken fingers, right? Just by making chicken fingers, you should end up on the nice list.
Chicken fingers. You know, if you'd have told me 10 years ago that a company making chicken fingers was going to have breakout moments in American commerce, I would have said, yeah, I don't know that that's possible.
Right.
Everybody makes chicken fingers. Fried chicken is everywhere. Not only the fried chicken players like Colonel Sanders still doing chicken right, and Popeyes, and a half a dozen other ones, but all of the other fast food players too, because you can get fried chicken at Wendy's and you can get chicken fingers at McDonald's.
Yep.
But no, these guys, they have chicken fingers, and that's not why they're on this list.
No,
I mean, they're pretty good chicken fingers.
Raising Cane's has good chicken fingers. Like, chicken fingers are pretty good no matter what.
I mean,
but what they've done is something that we really admire at Brand Federation, because we talk to all of our clients to say, you need to start building your brand on the inside. Don't go outside and ask people what they want and try to give it to them. Go inside and find out what you can create in terms of the culture that can deliver on a promise that people outside will love. And Raising Cane's is an internally, culturally driven brand, and we love that.
It's so counterintuitive, and yet it is the truth of how every great brand is built.
Yep.
They aren't built by pandering to consumers. They aren't built by crafting clever slogans and catchy phrases. They are built based on how they treat their internal audiences and how they align around a culture that is true to them. And then we experience that culture and we're mesmerized.
Yep.
And people love going to Raising Cane's. Yeah, they've got good chicken fingers and they've got good sauces. And if you go to one, you won't be disappointed. But the real reason you won't be disappointed is because you'll experience customer service unlike anything you're going to find in fast food.
Yep, it's really remarkable. So that internally driven culture lands them on the nice list because they got our attention because the business is doing so well.
Yeah.
But when you reverse engineer and start to think back about why that business is doing so well, you come to that truth that says if you start inside and you build that culture, the rest of it follows. And they've done an amazing job of that.
Yeah,
15
So good
years
job.
of same-store sales.
Santa loves you, Raising Cane's. Keep it coming. And who's next?
All right, so there's one more on the
got
next
one
list.
more.
We have a colleague at Brand Federation who is a marathon runner, and he brought this brand to our attention. Paul Atienza, thank you, Paul, for this. This
you,
is a
Paul.
brand who has done who's created an amazing case study in challenger branding, right? We've all read the seminal book that Adam Morgan wrote about eating the big fish, established this idea of challenger branding. There's a brand called Bandit Running who took the opportunity presented to them at the U.S. Olympic trials that were run at Beaverton, Oregon, at University of Oregon, the home turf of Nike, the big beast 800-pound gorilla in the category.
Best brand in the biggest brand.
Bandit Running decided at that event they're going to create an unbranded opportunity. So they took unsponsored athletes at the U.S. Olympic trial and gave them running gear that was all black and completely unbranded. And they became Bandit running ambassadors at the home turf of a brand whose ubiquitous swoosh, it just means everything in the category. They just pushed completely against the strength of the leader, which is its ubiquity, and said, no. We're going to take unsponsored athletes that aren't Michael Jordan or LeBron James, and we're going to put them in unbranded apparel.
Yeah, it's such a cool idea because they're literally pushing against that brand that they're challenging. And that's what great brands do when they challenge big brands, is they position that big brand as slow moving, dated, and out of touch. And the idea that they would go to Oregon, where Nike dominates, and they dominate everywhere, and say, you know what, you are not doing it right, and made them look old, made them look out of date, made them look out of touch. That's a pretty cool thing to do.
Finding the weakness in your competitor's strength is a classic challenger branding strategy. It's what Burger King did to McDonald's, right? Their strength, McDonald's strength, was its consistency and the fact that a Big Mac in Des Moines tastes like a Big Mac in Albany.
Yes.
Have it your way, right? It's going to be your own sandwich. It's not going to be a Big Mac cookie cutter thing,
right? That's right.
Burger King did it to McDonald's. Bandit did it to Nike by going to Beaverton and saying, unsponsored athletes in all black attire, unbranded. They pushed against Nike's ubiquity in a really brilliant, gutsy way.
It also speaks to the fact, and we've talked about this throughout both the naughty examples and the nice examples, that advertising isn't the primary driver of brand. I mean, here's an unadvertised brand that jumped to the front of what runners were interested in. And again and again and again, these brands have either failed or succeeded based on things that come before the advertising ever starts.
Amen, man. Like, I wish brands would stop asking the first question of what should we say and make their first question be, what do we believe in and how should we behave? That's the second question. The last question is, okay, what should we say about that?
Absolutely. When a client asks me if I can help them to become a better brand, I always ask, will you let me help you become a better company?
Right.
Because if you let me help you become a better company, I can promise you, I can make you a stronger brand.
Awesome. So, nice list and naughty list are kind of flip sides of the same coin, which is brand behavior that is either on the naughty list contrary to what you think the brand is about, never ends well. On the nice list, behavior that reinforces the meaning and the love and the affinity people have of those brands, right? So, naughty list, nice list. We have one more list.
Yes.
And this is the list of companies that Santa is watching. He's not sure what's going to happen to this company. He's not sure what's going to happen to these brands. Are they going to get coal? Are they going to get gifts?
He knows when they're sleeping. He knows when they're awake.
Exactly.
He is keeping an eye on these guys.
That's right. So the first one on the Santa's watching list is Starbucks, right? If you were Brian Niccol, the new CEO of Starbucks, what would you be thinking right now?
Yeah, I think they're in a really tough spot.
This is a hard one. It's a hard one.
And once again, it's a brand that wasn't started through advertising. They created a unique product and a superior experience, unlike anything that anyone else experienced, to deliver a third place where we love to go and hang out and just be. And they drove it home with things like their Green Apron training program, which taught people to focus on giving people a delightful start to their day.
Yep.
And then they kind of lost it.
Starbucks' business evolved to a point where its core customer were people who want to show up and think about the third place and spend time relaxing and have baristas who know their name and can make their special concoction coffee with a little bit of caramel and a little bit of this, right? Slow, third place kind of lifestyle. Now the business is being built by a whole separate set of consumers who don't want what that brand was founded on. They want the biggest pot of coffee they can get as fast as they can because they're on their way to work.
Yep.
And these two things don't live together well, right?
No.
That was 10 to 15 years ago. The problem is still the same. How do you figure out an experience for a brand that can reconcile those two seemingly incompatible realities?
it's going to be really tough for them, and that's why they're on the list. You know, the drive-through has provided profit and it's provided revenue growth, but it has taken away a lot of the lure of that experience they delivered. And it's put them in direct competition with players who are very good at fast, unsexy experiences like McDonald's. And to some extent, Dunkin',
Yeah, right. So you got Dunkin' and McDonald's on one side, which is good coffee fast. Right? No frills, good coffee fast. You're going to spend $2 less. And then you've got the rise of these little coffee shops that are local and feel high touch and feel more like a third place than Starbucks does now. And Starbucks is stuck in this no man's land between the two, and I don't know which way they're going to turn. Santa's very interested in that one. I'm not sure he has an easy, glib answer for a podcast about what Brian Nichols should do. Next on the list is a brand that we just talked about in the context of Bandit running, and it's Nike. Recent shift in CEOs. They kind of lost their edge in product innovation.
Definitely.
How are they going to get back? They're
losing some of their athletes.
What are they going to get? They're losing some of their athletes. How are they going to get back to where they were when they were the icon for athletic empowerment?
Yeah, it feels like, once again, a company that's lost its way a little bit. They were amazing at empowering athletes. They supported the very best athletes, but they never forgot the fact that they were really about the athlete in all of us. And empowering us to get off the couch and get off the chair and get out there and just do it. And in doing so, they won a loyal following of millions and millions of people. They also were unafraid of taking controversial stances, as they did with Colin Kaepernick and others. And recently, it just feels like they've kind of lost a bit. You know?
I think their Olympic campaign was a giant miss in that regard.
Awful.
It felt polarizing. It felt nasty. It felt like, you know, if you're not a world-class athlete, then you're a loser. And I thought it was completely antithetical to what this brand was about. So I think they lost a little bit of that for me. And I know that part of the problem that they had with their ex-CEO was that they lost their edge in innovation, and they really screwed up their distribution. So there are some business marketing decisions that were made that were not helpful for Nike. So it'll be interesting to see how they recover from those things.
Yeah, it's an important note to say this is not on the naughty list. They're still an okay brand. They're doing well, not great, but well. But they're at that point of decision where they have to decide, are we going to return to what made us great, which is, by the way, Nike, the right answer, or are you going to keep letting it fritter away? And the halls of bankrupt companies are littered with once great brands who lost their way.
Last brand on the Santa's watching list. It's not something that people think of as a brand necessarily, because it's not a company, it's not a for-profit organization, but it's the brand of America.
It's obviously in our world one of the most important brands there is out there, and it's also a brand that was built on principles. It was built on ideals. It was built on a common culture that was shared, and we've seen a lot of damage.
It's a hard one to talk about without getting political, but we will do it. It'll be hard, it'll be tough, but we'll do it. So there's a really interesting poll that came out from Gallup that asks people in America how they feel America's standing in the world is. And if you go back to data from 2000, the top two box, extremely strong or very strong, the percentage of people who answered the question, how do you feel about America's standing in the world? Top two box there was 70%. Today, 20 years later, 24 years later, it's 40%.
Wow.
So even we as Americans know that the standing of this brand in the world has dramatically dropped. And I think it goes back to the same thing that we're pointing out with the naughty and nice list, which is when a brand behaves continually or continuously enough in a way that's antithetical or dissonant to what we thought that brand was about, it takes a massive hit. And like it or not, that's what's happening to the brand of America. We are behaving in a way that is contrary to what people have come to expect over 200 plus years of this country.
I think that's right. And I don't think there's any side or political background that you have to believe that we are starting to feel like a country whose best days are behind us. And that's one of the challenges that happens with many of these brands. You get to a certain scale, you lose your way, you lose your principles, money becomes more important than the ideals that got you there. And you slowly lose influence and power.
Yeah.
We've talked about it with some of the naughty brands. We've talked about the threat of it with some of the brands that are Santa's keeping an eye on. And that is also true of this country. Whether or not we're able to still grow and thrive and reinforce those ideals that made this the greatest country on earth.
Yeah. Somebody once said we're a shining city on the hill. And what we're finding is that people aren't thinking of us that way anymore.
That's right.
Yeah. And we have to get back to that.
So Santa is watching, America.
So Santa's
Let's
watching.
see what we can do in the next few years to turn that one around.
Exactly. So, naughty list, nice list, Santa's watching list. Right? It's been a very interesting year.
It really has.
For brands. And if we think about the theme that runs through all this, it's the idea that your behavior defines your brand. And when over time that behavior is consistent and it's differentiating and it reflects a strong conviction and set of beliefs that everybody in your company can support, that brand builds over time. When that behavior starts to contradict the brand that's been built over time, nothing good happens to that company. And that's the difference between the naughty list and the nice list.
Really goes back to what we all learned as children, that actions really do speak louder than words. And that's true even in the world of branding. And if you keep those actions focused on positive encounters, experiences, culture, aligned with who you really are, you'll be okay as a brand.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up another naughty and nice list from
It's been
Brewing here in Richmond.
Vossen is an amazing place. I hope you have an amazing holiday this year.
Yes, happy holidays to all of you from Kelly and me and everybody at Brand Federation. Thanks for being with us this year. We hope to see you next year. Have an amazing holiday season and all the best for 2025.
Great 2025 on its way.
Thanks, everybody.